Well, moving to our other special focus on the show tonight, how much is too much for the right to food? What is the right way to go about it? As Parliament is constantly adjourned, hanging in the air is the Right to Food Bill, which is meant to be UPA 2's biggest welfare scheme.
Uthi denied her right to food. A widowed mother of 3, Uthi earns 1,000 rupees a month, the family's only income. But according to the government, she's not poor enough. Because she has a 17-year-old son, she is not entitled to subsidized food. Jagdish is a daily wager with an unemployed son and has 2 kacha rooms instead of 1. So he doesn't meet the government's criteria of poor either. Activists, including members of the National Advisory Council, say this is what makes the government's Right to Food Bill a potential welfare disaster. The bill is set to be taken up by the cabinet for its tabling this session.
Any kind of selection process and the resultant targeting is always mismanaged.
2% of India are automatically included. For the rest, entitlements will be based on deprivation factors like 1-room kacha house, no adult member between 16 and 59, homes headed by women with no adult members, households with no literate adults above 25 years, and landless casual labour. But Uthi and Jagdish do not make it into this list, which is why activists are demanding do away with deprivation criteria and have universal PDS instead of a targeted one. The government says they want a more graded system to make sure that only the more deserving get the right to food. The activists say in a country like ours, it's so difficult to identify the poor, and they want some to be excluded, but everyone else to be included and given the right to food.
There are so many categories in this bill that the names change, the nomenclature changes, but still the APL, BPL concept is there.
The purpose of this bill is just a political as far as Congress is concerned. But we are committed to the rights of the poor.
Sources in the government say the bill is not likely to make it before the monsoon session next year. So there is a lot of time for discussion. In New Delhi with Alfred, Anchal Vora, NDTV.
A lot of time for discussion. What will be the final shape of that bill? Well, that's the current heated debate on, again, sadly, outside Parliament. Joining me tonight on this, with me in studio is Professor Adjourned. Really somebody who's been the architect of the Right to Food campaign in India. Also with me is Aruna Roy, again, one of the key architects of the Right to Food campaign, also the Right to Information campaign and many, many other causes. Also joining me, Rajiv Kumar, Secretary General of FICCI, and I also spoke earlier tonight to the Food Minister, Mr. K.V. Thomas, really the man at the centre of the storm. But let me just begin first with Professor Adjourned, Aruna Roy, who we saw today at that campaign. Professor Drez, you use that catchy phrase, "Kaun banega scorepati," to underline what you have pointed out, the flaws in the current draft bill. Why do you think it's so crucial that the bill in this version is not what's presented to Parliament?
Well, I think what is emerging now quite clearly, and what I have tried to convey with this sentence, "Kaun banega scorepati," is that the socio-economic and caste census, which has already started, may or may not be more reliable than earlier BPL censuses. Incidentally, the socio-economic and caste census is not mentioned in the food security bill. The food security bill, or at least the version that is now in the public domain, does not clarify how the different groups, priority groups, general households and excluded are to be identified. It leaves that completely up to the government. But the presumption seems to be that it will be done through the socio-economic and caste census. And the problem is that this is a completely untested method. It's emerging now quite rapidly, that it may well not be more reliable than earlier BPL censuses. And we know for a fact that earlier censuses have left huge numbers of people out of the system. We know that about 50% of poor people in India don't have a BPL card because the earlier BPL census missed them. So I cannot understand how a bill can be tabled in Parliament that attempts to give people food entitlements without being clear as to who is going to be entitled to what. Second point is that even if it works, supposing that the identification works, even then, in my opinion, this very complex three-way division between general, priority and excluded is going to be very disruptive, because it's going to undermine a trend in many states today towards a more inclusive PDS, either universal like in Tamil Nadu or near universal like in Chhattisgarh, and away from BPL targeting. This is a very positive trend that has to be strengthened, and that should not be undermined by imposing central criteria of multi-layered targeting, like what is happening now. And last and most importantly, I do not understand the need for 3 categories. If the government really wants to exclude 25% of households in rural areas completely, which I would not support, but if that is going to be done, then why do you insist on dividing the rest? You know, let everyone else be in the same boat. The only reason you might want to do that is because you really want to enforce these measly official poverty lines of 32 rupees per day per person or 25 rupees per day per person in rural areas. If you acknowledge that these poverty lines don't really make much sense, that they are too low, then leave all these people in the same boat and exclude 25% and give everyone else the same common entitlement. That will be so much simpler, transparent, workable, it can be done.
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone. Fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. ndtv.com/apps.